The first thing I remember is the smell of antiseptic and the sound of someone crying, not loud crying. The quiet kind. The kind people do when they think no one can hear them. My eyes were open, the smallest fraction, just enough to see the blur of fluorescent light above me and the shape of my mother hunched in a plastic chair by the window. Her shoulders shook. She had her hand pressed flat over her mouth. I tried to speak. Nothing came out. My throat felt like I'd swallowed gravel. I tried again, Mom. It came out as a rasp, barely a sound at all. But she heard it. She was at my side in 2 steps, her hands on my face, her eyes red and swollen. Baby. Oh, sweetheart, don't move. Don't move yet. What? I couldn't finish the sentence. My head was pounding in a way I'd never felt before, like something behind my eyes was trying to push through. You were in an accident, she said. You're okay. You're going to be okay. I believed her. I always believed her. I didn't know yet that I shouldn't have. My name is Jenna. I was 31 years old when a car ran a red light at the intersection of Mercier and Fifth and hit the passenger side of my husband's SUV going 47 miles an hour. I know the exact speed because it was in the accident report. I read it 3 times, alone in my apartment 8 months later. 47 miles an hour. The physics of it, what that kind of force does to a body, still makes me feel cold when I think about it. My husband walked away with a bruised shoulder and a scratch above his eyebrow. I was unconscious for 11 hours. The neurologist called it a moderate traumatic brain injury. There was a small bleed that resolved on its own. I was lucky, she said. She said the word lucky like she meant it. And maybe she was right, in the narrow medical sense. Lucky the bleed stopped. Lucky I didn't lose language or motor function. Lucky. But here's the thing about luck. It depends entirely on what you're being measured against. My husband's name is Randall. We'd been married for 3 years when the accident happened. We met through mutual friends at a rooftop party in Seattle during the summer I was 27. Me in a yellow dress I borrowed from my roommate. Him laughing at something his friend said with his head thrown back. Completely unself-conscious. He was charming and it heated the smell of lavender. And he remembered things at a work happy hour. It just seems like who someone is. I know now that it is always a skill. We dated for 14 months before he proposed. The ring was his grandmother's, a sapphire surrounded by small diamonds, antique setting, a little worn on one side from decades of wear. I thought that was the most romantic thing I had ever seen. A ring that had been loved for 60 years, handed down through a family that clearly valued permanence. I was a CPA at the time. I'd just made senior associate at my firm. I was careful with numbers, careful with money, careful with most things. My mother used to joke that I read instruction manuals for fun. I did not read the prenuptial agreement before I signed it. I need you to understand something about that because I know how it sounds. I know exactly how it sounds. A woman who reconciles 6-figure accounts for a living, who catches discrepancies down to the decimal point, who is constitutionally incapable of ignoring fine print, and she signed a legal document she hadn't read. Here is what actually happened. We were supposed to sign it the week before the wedding. Randall's family attorney sent it over. A man named Mr. Holt, who I'd met exactly once at a dinner where he'd spent 40 minutes talking about his boat. The document arrived on a Thursday. I planned to sit with it over the weekend, read it carefully, maybe have a colleague at a firm I trusted give it a look. On Friday afternoon, my future mother-in-law called me. She said the attorney needed us to sign before the end of business that day. Something about a property trust that needed to be finalized before the wedding for estate planning purposes. She said it was just standard language, nothing unusual, that every couple in their family signed essentially the same document, that Randall's brother and his wife had signed theirs and hadn't even hired a separate attorney to review it. She said it with that particular tone she had, warm and slightly bewildered, like she couldn't quite understand why anyone would need to make something so simple, so complicated. I was at a fitting for my wedding dress when she called. My maid of honor was standing next to me with pins in her mouth. My mother was crying at the corner of the room. because she said I looked beautiful. The seamstress was on her knees adjusting the hem. I signed it that afternoon. I didn't read it. That decision would cost me nearly $200,000. But I'm getting ahead of myself. I was awake in the hospital bed for maybe 40 minutes before I heard them in the hallway. My mother had stepped out to find a nurse. The door to my room wasn't fully closed. There was a 3-inch gap, and through it came voices I recognized immediately. Randall's mother and his father. I had learned very quickly in our marriage that when those two spoke to each other privately, you were not meant to hear it. There was a register they used, low, clipped, efficient, that was entirely different from the warm, public performance they gave at dinner tables and holiday gatherings. I had heard that register exactly twice before, once through a wall at their house in Bellevue, and once on a phone call Randall didn't know I'd partially overheard. I heard it now. I lay completely still. I'm not sure I made a conscious decision to do it. My body just went quiet. The timing is what concerns me, his father said. The timing is fine. His mother's voice, flat. She was unconscious for 11 hours. There's nothing she could have. I'm not worried about what she heard. I'm worried about what he's going to do now. He's not thinking clearly. A pause. He'll do what we discussed, she said. He said he needed more time. He doesn't have more time. The Whitmore deal closes in 6 weeks. If she's still on any of those accounts when it closes. Keep your voice down. Silence. Footsteps that stopped, then resumed, quieter. I kept breathing through my nose, slow and even, the way you do when you're pretending to be asleep. My heart was beating so hard, I was genuinely afraid they might hear it through the door. File when she's still recovering, his mother said. It's better. She'll be overwhelmed. She won't have the bandwidth to fight. The footsteps moved away. I lay there staring at the ceiling tiles. My mother came back 4 minutes later and found me with my eyes open and my hands clenched at my sides. She took one look at my face and said, "What happened?" I told her. All of it, exactly as I'd heard it. She sat down in the plastic chair. She was quiet for a long time. Then she said, "Don't tell him you're awake yet." I looked at her. "Just for now," she said. "Just until we know what we're dealing with." My mother retired from the county clerk's office after 31 years. She had spent 3 decades watching what happened to people who walked into legal situations unprepared. She understood, in a bone-deep way I hadn't yet developed. That information is the only currency that matters when someone has decided to hurt you. So when Randall came in 20 minutes later, I kept my eyes closed. I felt him stand at the foot of the bed. He didn't touch me. He didn't say my name. He stood there for maybe 90 seconds. Then he left. I was discharged 4 days later with a folder full of discharge instructions, a prescription for a medication to manage the headaches, and a follow-up appointment with the neurologist. Randall picked me up. He was solicitous, attentive, asked 3 times if I was comfortable in the car. He carried my bag inside. He made me soup. I watched him move around our kitchen and I tried to find something in his face that matched what I had heard. I couldn't. He looked exactly like my husband. He looked like the man in the yellow light photograph on our bookshelf, laughing at a rooftop party, completely unselfconscious. The skill, I thought, it's always a skill. 2 weeks after I came home, while I was still sleeping 12 hours a night and struggling to read for more than 20 minutes without a headache, Randall sat me down at the kitchen table and told me he thought we should separate. He was sorry. He still cared about me deeply. He had been feeling disconnected for a long time, and the accident had made him realize that life was short and he didn't want to spend it in a marriage that wasn't working. He said all of this in a calm, measured, gentle voice while I sat across from him with a headache behind my left eye and the aftertaste of my morning medication in the back of my throat. I said, "Okay." He blinked. "Okay," I said again. "I think that's probably the right decision." The look on his face was not relief. It was something more complicated than that, like a calculation he'd been running that had just returned an unexpected result. I went upstairs. I sat on the edge of the bed, and then I called my cousin Thea. who had just passed the bar exam and was clerking for a family law judge in Tacoma. "I need you to tell me who the best divorce attorney in King County is," I said. "Not the nicest one. The best one." Her name was Ms. Aldrich. She had an office on the 42nd floor of a building downtown with a view of the Sound and exactly 0 personal items on her desk. No photos, no plants, nothing. Just a yellow legal pad, a pen, and a look in her eyes that made me feel, for the first time in 3 weeks, like someone was firmly on my side. I told her everything. The hospital room, the voices in the hallway, the prenup I'd signed without reading, the Whitmore deal, whatever that was, the 6 weeks. She wrote for 2 solid minutes without looking up. Then she said, "Walk me through your finances. Every account, every asset, every joint holding, all of it. I'm a CPA. That part, at least, I could do." I walked her through it, our joint checking, the investment accounts, the mortgage on the house in Bellevue, my own retirement savings, which I had. This was the part that made her stop writing. Transferred into a joint account 18 months earlier because Randall said it would simplify our taxes. Ms. Aldrich set her pen down. "Your prenup," she said. "Do you have a copy?" I requested one from the attorney. "Mr. Holt. He said he'd send it within the week." "He won't," she said. "Or if he does, it'll be slow and incomplete." She made a note. "We'll request it formally. Now tell me, the morning you signed, you were at a dress fitting?" "Yes." "Who called you to tell you it needed to be signed that day?" "My mother-in-law." She wrote that down, and then she underlined it. "And do you have any record of that call?" I thought about it. My phone records. It would show a call from her number. She nodded. "Good, that's good. What does it mean?" I asked. "It might mean that the urgency was manufactured," she said. "It might mean she was deliberately creating circumstances in which you would sign under pressure, without adequate time for review. That's relevant to whether the prenup is enforceable." She paused. "But I want to be honest with you. Getting a prenup thrown out is not easy. We'd need to show duress or procedural defects, or that you lacked meaningful opportunity to seek independent counsel." I had a colleague I was planning to ask. "Did anyone advise you of your right to independent legal counsel before you signed?" I thought about it, really thought about it. Mr. Holt had emailed the document. He had not, anywhere in that email or in any communication before that, suggested that I might want my own attorney to review it. "No," I said. She picked up her pen again. "That's a procedural defect," she said quietly. "It may not be dispositive on its own, but it's something." The Whitmore deal turned out to be a commercial real estate transaction. Randall's family business, a property management company his parents had built over 30 years, was in the process of acquiring a portfolio of office buildings on the east side. It was, my attorney discovered through proper channels, a transaction valued at slightly over $14 million. Randall was listed as a 20% stakeholder in the company. His name had been added to the operating agreement 9 months after we got married. Mine had not. But here's where my professional life became unexpectedly useful. I had spent 4 years as a CPA watching people do creative things with money and asset structures. Ways of moving value that were technically legal but constructed specifically to obscure where things actually stood. I knew what those structures looked like from the inside because I'd helped clients understand them, and occasionally helped untangle them when those clients found themselves on the wrong end. I started pulling financial records, not illegally. I had legitimate access to most of our joint accounts, and what I couldn't access directly, I requested through proper legal channels or provided to my attorney to request. It took 6 weeks. 6 weeks of working 3 hours a night after sleeping all day, headache or no headache, reading spreadsheets and statements and transfer records until the picture became clear. The retirement savings I'd moved into our joint account had been transferred out 8 months ago, not into a business account, into a personal account in Randall's name only. It was done in 2 transactions, 11 days apart, each just under the threshold that would have triggered an automatic bank notification. I sat with that document for a long time. I am, professionally, a very calm person about numbers. Numbers are just information. They don't lie, and they don't have feelings. They just tell you what happened. What happened was that my husband had taken a $187,000 of my retirement savings and moved it into an account I had no access to, in increments specifically designed to avoid detection. I sent the records to Ms. Aldrich's at 11:15 on a Wednesday night. She called me at 7 the next morning. The prenup is being challenged on grounds of duress and procedural defect, she said. And we're now looking at potential fraud claims. Are you ready to move? Yes, I said. This is going to get difficult. I know. His family is going to push back. I know. And it's going to take time. I looked out the window of the apartment I was now renting in Capitol Hill, a small one-bedroom I'd furnished mostly from Facebook Marketplace, which still smelled faintly of someone else's candles. I thought about the sound of his parents' voices through that 3-inch gap in the hospital door. The Whitmore deal closes in 6 weeks. She'll be overwhelmed. She won't have the bandwidth to fight. I have time, I said. Here is what I've learned about how people like Randall's family operate, from being inside it and from watching it unravel. They are not unusual. That's the part that would surprise most people. They don't see themselves as villains. They have a logic, a coherent internal narrative in which protecting family wealth is not only acceptable but practically a moral obligation. They've been doing this for a long time. I found, through discovery, that Randall's brother's divorce 4 years earlier had involved many of the same structures, the same attorney, the same prenup language. It was almost templated. A system refined over time. They relied on people being too overwhelmed, too in love, too trusting, too exhausted to look closely. They were not wrong about most people. They were wrong about most. The deposition of Randall's mother took place on a Thursday in February in a conference room at my attorney's office. She arrived in a cream blazer with her reading glasses on a chain and the expression of someone who considered this entire proceeding a mild inconvenience. She had prepared answers for the questions she expected. She had not prepared for the phone records, the timeline of the prenup signing, the testimony from the seamstress at my dress fitting, who remembered the phone call, remembered me stepping outside to take it, remembered me coming back looking stressed, and the deposition of Mr. Brana Holt, Randall's family attorney, who had been very carefully questioned about whether he had ever advised me of my right to seek independent counsel. He had not. My attorney documented that, clearly and completely. I sat across the table from my mother-in-law for 3.5 hours, and I watched her realize incrementally that her prepared answers did not fit the questions she was actually being asked. I watched the cream blazer and the reading glasses and the mild inconvenience expression hold their shape while something underneath shifted. I felt nothing I expected to feel. No anger, not right then. Not even satisfaction. Just a very clear sense of seeing something exactly as it was. We settled out of court. I can't discuss the specific terms, but I can tell you that I recovered significantly more than $187,000. The prenup was voided as part of the settlement. My attorney's assessment about the procedural defect had been correct. Failure to advise an opposing party of their right to independent counsel is, in Washington state, a recognized basis for challenging a prenuptial agreement's validity. I also filed a separate complaint with the state bar regarding Mr. Holt's conduct. That process is ongoing and I cannot discuss it further. Randall and I are divorced. It was finalized on a Tuesday, which felt right somehow. A Tuesday is just a Tuesday, not a day with any particular weight to it. Our house in Bellevue sold for a price I can't disclose under our agreement. But my share of the equity covered the retainer I paid Ms. Aldrich with enough left over to do something useful with. The Whitmore deal closed, eventually, after a delay I won't claim any credit for causing. My mother called me the night the divorce was finalized. We talked for 2 hours. At some point she said, I keep thinking about that hospital room. About those 4 days when we knew and he didn't know we knew. Me too, I said. Were you scared? I thought about it honestly. Yes, I said, but not of him. I was scared of not having enough time, of missing something, of making a mistake that would cost me the whole thing. You didn't. I didn't. She was quiet for a moment. She said, when I told you to pretend you were still asleep, I wasn't sure I was doing the right thing. I was just following some instinct. It was the right thing, I said. I keep thinking, what if you had said something? What if you'd reacted? I'd probably still be trying to figure out what was happening, I said, and everything would be different. That's the part that stays with me. Not the money, not the settlement, not even the deposition. It's that 3-inch gap in the hospital room door, the sound of fluorescent lights, the smell of antiseptic, my mother's hand pressed over her mouth, the choice to lie completely still and just listen. I'm back at work now. I made partner 18 months ago, not at the same firm, at a new one, a smaller one where I knew the people and trusted the culture. I have a 1-bedroom apartment that no longer smells like someone else's candles because I repainted it and bought a diffuser and put actual art on the walls. I went on one date last year with a man a friend set me up with, a veterinarian who was funny and kind and paid for dinner and texted the next morning. I told him I wasn't ready, which was true. He said okay, no pressure, and that was that. I'm not in a hurry. There are things I know now that I didn't know at 27 in a yellow dress on a rooftop in Seattle. I know that charm without consistency is just performance. I know that urgency when manufactured is a pressure tactic and nothing else. I know that a person who loves you will always give you time to think. And I know this. Which is the thing I most want to say. If anyone reading this is somewhere in the middle of something that feels impossible, the moment I stopped feeling overwhelmed was the moment I stopped trying to process the whole picture at once and started asking one single question. What do I know for certain? Right now? Today? One fact. One document. One date on a transfer record. One note in a phone log. You don't need to see the whole thing clearly to start. You just need to see one edge of it. That's enough. Start there, and don't let anyone, not your ex-husband, not his family, not a timeline they manufactured for you, tell you that you don't have enough time to fight for what's yours. I deleted the last voicemail Randall ever left me on a Sunday morning without listening to it. I stood in my kitchen, in my socks with coffee going cold on the counter, and I pressed delete and I didn't feel anything at all. That's how you know you're done. People ask me sometimes if I'm bitter, usually people who have heard some version of the story secondhand, enough to get the broad shape of it. The accident, the husband, the money, the divorce. They ask it carefully, like they're testing whether I'm still broken in some visible way. I'm not bitter. I want to be clear about that because I think bitterness gets confused with clarity, and what I have is clarity. Here's what I actually believe happened. Randall's family built a system over decades that worked because it depended on people being too trusting, too exhausted, or too in love to pay close attention. It had worked before me. It was designed to work again after me, and for a long time. 3 years of a marriage, an afternoon at a dress fitting, 11 hours of unconsciousness, it was working on me too. What changed was a 3-inch gap in a hospital room door. I didn't do anything heroic in that moment. I was lying in a hospital bed with a brain injury, running on whatever reserves a body keeps for emergencies, and I held still and I listened. That was the whole thing. That was the decision that changed everything. Not a grand act of courage, not some sudden revelation of inner strength I didn't know I had. Just stillness, just paying attention. I think about that a lot when I catch myself waiting for the right moment to act on something. The right moment doesn't usually look like a moment at all. It looks like lying very still in a hospital bed, listening through a gap in a door, deciding to know what you know before you let anyone know you know it. Randall's family got exactly what they built for themselves. Not punishment in any dramatic sense, just consequence. When you construct a life around extracting value from people who trust you, you build something hollow at the center. The Whitmore deal closed. The money moved, and none of it changed what they actually were, which is people who looked at a woman recovering from a brain injury and saw a timeline to manage. That's the thing about that kind of calculation. It always underestimates someone. My cousin Thea, who pointed me toward Ms. Propig, Aldrich, called me after the settlement. She said, I keep thinking. You did all of this while you were still having headaches, while you were still sleeping 12 hours a night. She said it like it was remarkable. It didn't feel remarkable from the inside. It felt like the only available option. When someone takes something from you, your money, your trust, your sense of what your life actually was, you can either accept the version of events they've handed you, or you can go find out what actually happened. One document at a time, one fact at a time. One transfer record with 2 transactions 11 days apart, each just under the reporting threshold. I chose to find out. I don't think intelligence is what saved me exactly. I think it was the decision to treat my own situation with the same rigor I'd spent years applying to other people's finances. To not give myself a pass on the hard questions just because the answers were going to hurt. That required something more than smarts. It required a willingness to sit with what I found and not look away. That's the thing I'd want anyone to take from this. Not that I was exceptional, but that paying attention, really paying attention, even when it's inconvenient, even when you're exhausted, even when the answers are going to cost you something, is always worth it. The truth of a situation doesn't change based on whether you're ready to see it. It's just there, waiting, and the moment you're willing to look, everything else becomes possible.